Aloha, my name is Christian from Kona Freedivers. I'm with Connor as always, and we're going to talk to you about some shooting lines today.
We ended up getting a phone call the other day. One of our customers on Oahu called and was asking about some of the videos and stuff. And one thing that he said that he hasn't been able to find a lot of out there as far as information goes was shooting lines. Not necessarily what they are or even how to rig them, but it was more of what would you use each for? Why would one be better than the other? You know, what are the benefits and negatives of each? Because there are a few different shooting lines out there, different sizes, thicknesses, materials. And I figured I told him that, shout out to Uncle over in Oahu. I told him I would do a video on it. We would do a video on it. And kind of just go over it, not really too in depth, but kind of go over shooting lines, what I prefer, what stuff's good for, what it's used for. So that's kind of where we're at today. So, hope you guys are ready to learn some about shooting lines, or at least learn some opinions about shooting lines.
All right, shooting line. What is it? What is it for? Tell me about it. What can you tell me about it?
Well, unless you're old school and you're free shafting, which not a lot of people do, if they can help it. I know some really good free shafters out there, though, but most people are going to need shooting line to end up spearfishing. It's basically what's holding your shaft to the gun. There's a lot of different kinds of shooting line, that's basically what it's for. And we kind of go over what they're used or why people use certain ones.
Yeah, so let's start off with monofilament. I see this stuff everywhere. It's on most spear guns that we rig up, that we get in stock. And so tell me about why is it so popular?
Well, monofilament, it's a shooting line that's used a lot. It originally kind of is for more leader line and fishing. One thing I like about monofilament is that it does kind of cut through the water easier than some of the other ones out there do. It tends to be pretty high strength. Abrasion resistance is okay. It's easy to crimp, so it's inexpensive. So yeah, mono is really common. There's different kinds, different strengths anyway. We usually in spearfishing, I'm thinking 200 to 400 pound tests is kind of what is the most common. I like to use kind of on the reef and stuff, I use lower tests because it's thinner. It doesn't affect the shot. It doesn't cause as much drag in the water. And that's one big thing with mono. Doesn't affect the drag in the water as much as some of the other ones. So on most of the application, most of the guns that I use, I'm using 200 pound tests, which is this stuff here. And you basically crimp it on. I use 200. It depends on what you're going for, though. So if you want to go, you're going to go a little bit deeper, maybe for a little bit bigger fish, or you're going to be, trying to shoot maybe jacks or willows in the holes or something, you might want to go a little thicker, 300 and 400. I usually think that's a little thick for reef, so I don't usually run that. Blue water, on the other hand, you're going to go out there. You're going for big fish. You want some heavy line. So 400 is, I usually kind of reserve that for rigging up blue water guns. Guns that you're going to go out and you're shooting big fish with. It does affect the shot a little bit more. So when you start getting into these, especially when you start getting into the Dyneema or the Kevlar, or basically Dyneema, then you start looking at shaft size too. So that's the 200 is really good for smaller guns with smaller shaft sizes, not as powerful. When you start getting into the heavier shafts, you can use a thicker line. It's like the 400 pound test. So I believe this is 2.1 mil is the diameter of the 400. It goes down to like a 1.7 on the 200 pound, and that varies depending on brands. So what I've got here is the Spear Pro stuff. I also really like to use, one of my favorites was Grand Slam High Seas is a really good monofilament. One thing with mono, there's every now and then there's some negatives with it. It isn't as abrasion resistant as some of the other ones. So if it catches something sharp, it'll cut right through, usually. So you can run the risk of cutting it if you're going to be around structure. So on the reef, it will hold up, but if you get a really big fish on the reef, it could very well cut it. The other thing that I'm not a huge fan of this, one of the downfalls of monofilament, is it does tend to stretch. And it stretches. It's got some stretch to it. So yeah, that's another that's not the best of things to do. So anyway, so yeah, 200-pound mono. It's pretty easy to deal with. Like I said, it usually comes with crimps. So yeah, what you need on stuff like that is just a pair of crimpers. You can use that on some of the other lines as well, and of course different size crimps. And we got all different kinds of crimps there. And yeah, that's what you're going to be using to attach a monofilament to the shaft.
So Dyneema cord.
Yep.
Explain that one for me.
Okay. So Dyneema cord is kind of what it is. This one's a high resistance or a high abrasion resistance Dyneema. It's actually nylon sheet Dyneema. So there's a nylon sheet over it. Inside is a linear core of Dyneema. So it's the individual linears. So when you cut it, it fluffs out. It's got all the little individual strands. This is usually used for reel lines. It's a really good one for reel lines and other types of rigging. I don't see it as much on guns. And the main reason is that with this, it's real rough. I don't know if you can see that in there, but it's got kind of a rough outside. Even if you go kind of thin, it's not the highest test. It's I think this one isn't bad. It's 185 kilos, and it's a 1.8 millimeter. So yeah, I mean you can use it. You can use it as shooting line. I don't like it as much when you start getting into. You've got the two different materials. You got the jacket over top of the core. If one of those fails, the other one is more likely to fail. So it's not as strong as some of the other ones. Generally, I'm using this for reel line. You can use it for shooting line. I wouldn't recommend it. Generally, with this stuff too, you're going to end up being, you're not going to crimp it. You're going to be tying it, and that's the other problem with this. When you tie things, it loses strength as well. So at the knot, I don't know what. It depends on the material. I was told a while back that when you make a knot, that knot's like 30% weaker than line is elsewhere.
So we got this stuff too. Looks pretty similar to the Dyneema.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference of that one?
Well, this is what they call ultra high weight molecular polyethylene. I believe that's what it is. Wow, first try. So yeah, I think sometimes it's kind of labeled the misnomer as like Kevlar, but yeah, it's a type of material that's really, really strong. It's got these really long chains of molecules in there, and it creates a really strong material. One cool thing with this, it is kind of the same. It's got a little bit of the internal, like the jacket on top, but not the same as this. So this tends to be stronger. It tends to be stiffer, so you can see it it kinks a little bit. And this is kind of thick. I want to say this is 1.9 millimeter. So this works really good for shooting line. Again, this stuff you can actually crimp if you do it correctly. You can also do knots in it, but it's a really, really strong line, and it works pretty good for shooting line. This cuts through the water a little bit better than that the Dynamo Cord, because it's smoother. It's almost like a waxy kind of thing. Yeah. Again, with this thickness though, like 1.9, you're going to want to use it with a thicker shaft if you're using it for bigger guns. So a 7.5 millimeter or an 8 millimeter shaft. That way it can pull it through the water. It's not going to affect the shot as much. So this stuff's really good. You can actually get this in different thicknesses and tests. This is 1.9. A good one, I like to use like a 1.5, 1.4 mil if you can find it. It works really good as shooting line, super strong. I would suggest this if you're going to go after big fish in amongst rocks and reef and whatnot. The oil rigs, we don't have anything like that here, but we do have some of the fish farm out there. We've got the buoys. This stuff is really good for if you're shooting big pelagic type fish around structure, because if it does kind of tangle up on it, it's not nearly as likely to fail. Mono, if you touch a barnacle encrusted chain, it doesn't take a whole lot to get it to cut through. This is really hard to cut through, and you can see that when you try to cut it with a knife, even a sharp knife. Doesn't really cut real easy. So this stuff's awesome. It comes in a lot of different colors. There's a lot of different companies that have basically the same kind of deal. So yeah, that's what that is. I won't even pretend to try to know that string of words that I said earlier about it, but it's good stuff. A good example of this is Aussie Line. Aussie Line is basically those two.
We did a video on it. No?
We did, yeah. So we talked a little bit about the Aussie lines for reel lines in the other video. But yeah, this is what that is. This is the company we get that from. Really good for a shooting line. So it's more for bigger fish. You don't want to use that for heavier duty rigs where you don't want to lose a prized fish. Yeah. So, and the thicker that you go, you're going to want to go shorter range, because it does affect the shot, not as much as that.
So I've never seen this before. I know that you were excited when you picked it up. It looks a lot different.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What's so special about it?
Yeah. So what we've got here, this is hollow braid Dyneema. So this is only 300-pound test, but as you can see, it's really, really thin. So one cool thing with this is it doesn't affect the shot very much. It looks really thin. It's actually really strong. What makes this stuff special is that it's actually hollow. And this stuff here, that's a solid core. That's a solid core. So you're either going to be tying it or crimping it. This, you can eliminate crimps and you can eliminate tying knots because you can actually do what's called, I call it like it's like the finger, what is it called?
Chinese finger trap?
Yeah, finger cuffs. It's basically like a finger cuff splice. So you have a little tool. It's basically a little splicing needle. You stick it in there, and you can actually kind of push that in, and it creates the hollow core, and you can get that needle in there. And what happens is you get this thing inside, and you can actually splice it all the way up here, right? And it goes inside the other one, and then as it pulls just like those the finger handcuffs we had when you're a kid. When you pull on it, the harder you pull, the harder the harder it holds. That's kind of what this is all about. So it's really nice because you eliminate all those knots, which are going to make that line weaker. I think one of the negatives with something like this is that it is so thin. You won't want to get
tangled up,
caught in it. It won't be very good, especially if you're fighting a big fish. The other thing with this is because it is so thin, it can be a little bit easier to cut, but I would use this for kind of an all-around shooting line on the reef. If you're going to go bigger fish, blue water, I'd probably go a little bit thicker. Yeah. But it's kind of a cool line, hollow braided Dyneema. And this is a little thin for my taste. It's 300-pound test, but it's a little thin. I would want to go a little bit thicker, but you can use this as shooting line. The only thing I can really think other than, than how it's so thin and dangerous is that if it gets a knot in it, like this has one right here, it's, especially if it gets pulled tight, you're gonna have to change your line. You're not gonna be able to go in there and try to get that knot out after you've got a knot in it and it gets tight. So you will have to change your line. And if you've ever been, even with monofilament, you'll notice that it's pretty easy. Not even trying to get a knot in your line, even mono. So that's one negative about it, but it's a really, really strong shooting line. Dyneema, it's a little bit spendy, kind of like both of these are, but you're getting that abrasion resistance and just the quality out of it. So yeah, this is good stuff. I knew a lot of people that were using this quite a while ago, and the company that made it for a while, Blackwater, is called Blackwater Braid. This I got from Catch All Tackle, awesome shop over on the East Coast. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm using. I'm just starting to play around with this. So when we get out there and we start using it, I will probably end up having a follow-up video, maybe actually with some footage of me out there chasing fish around, maybe even landing one or two. So we'll see. But yeah, that's
maybe.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. I get lucky every once in a while. But yeah, so yeah, that's basically what we've got. So yeah, in order to keep this thing from swimming away with your dinner, you're going to use some of these, and they've all got different tests and sizes and whatnot. You just have to end up picking what's best for your application. So personally, I still am a big fan of monofilament. I'll be using that a lot. That's what most people are using. Although a lot of people now are going over towards that Dyneema, and the hollow braid Spectra and those kinds of lines. So yeah, we'll see what happens. You kind of go out and use some and see which one you think is the best. And there are also some really good videos out there showing how to rig it. I'm not going to get into that today. Chris Coates with Coatesman Spearfishing. He's a wealth of information. Sure. I learn a lot from him. I've been following for a decade. And he has a lot of really cool videos on stuff like that, as well as some of the other ones Rob Allen Spearfishing does. Nautilus. They've all got some pretty cool videos out there going into some of those rigging techniques. So maybe in the future I'll do one. I feel like there's been quite a few done, so I don't know if I'm going to really go into it. But yeah, maybe we'll get some footage out there of actually shooting fish with this stuff. All right. Well, that was kind of what I have for you on the shooting lines, and I hope you learned a little bit. At least maybe you just like to listen to me talk. That was starting. So yeah, that's kind of what I got for you on the lines. Yeah, thanks for always bringing up these ideas for us. You kind of get to the point where I can't think of anything else to talk about. I mean, I can always think of something to talk about. But
He's always talking.
I can't always think of something you'd be interested in listening to. I guess we'll put it that way. But yeah, so shout out to Uncle on Oahu. I love the fact that he called and he said, "Hey, can't find videos on this. Let me know the differences." Yeah. It helps us out a ton. So yeah, we appreciate you joining us.
Yeah. If you guys got any video ideas or questions, just leave it down in the comments. We'd be glad to help you guys out. But for now, just like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.
Sounds good.
Aloha.